3D revaluation update. So, Mr. LaBelle, please tell us great news.
Okay, well, the great news is that the project is nearing the final stages. We expect we'll probably be ready to release values to the public within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we're nearing the end. Essentially today, what we wanted to do was give a little bit of a primer to the board and to the public about property taxes in general, how they work, how revaluations work, and give you a little bit of an update about where we are in the project process. So I've got hopefully a relatively short slideshow. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me, and we'll address things as we go. I'm joined by Kevin Lean, who's the project manager from KRT Appraisal. They're the company that's handling the revaluation for the town, and Kevin will be able to assist me with answering any technical questions that might come up. So let's see if that's actually working good. Okay, so property taxes in general, a lot of times with any type of government, people talk a lot about what the government does and doesn't do, and a lot about taxes, and people are generally upset about, making the big payment every year. But I thought I'd take a moment and just write down some of the items that your property taxes are used for in either municipal government, the school department, and the county government. And this is just a partial list, but you can see there's a wide range of things that fall under the property taxes, from police and the justice system and the correction systems to public education, elections, fire and EMS, pretty much all the things that touch our lives on a pretty much a daily basis, roads and infrastructure, all come under the jurisdiction to some degree by the property tax. So, it's a fairly large check that most people who own property have to write every year, but it does go to good things and things that are necessary to have a civilized society. It keeps a lot of things going, rec department, trash disposal, pretty much everything that you can think of. A little bit about how property taxes are formulated. This kind of goes back to your days in school with the 3 branches of government: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judiciary. Taxes are mostly have to do with the legislative and the executive branch. On the left-hand side, you have pretty much the legislative actions. That has to do with the appropriations and how much the tax actually is. And all power to tax is vested by the Maine's Constitution to the legislature, and the legislature cedes that authority out in the terms of property taxes to the towns, the school districts, and the counties. So your town meeting here in Raymond is the legislative body that approves the town budget, that handles all the local expenditures, roads, fire, trash pickup, all those types of things. Obviously, the referendum vote in June is where the legislative action of voters approves the school district tax, and your elected representatives at the county handle the county portion of the tax, which handles your justice system, our sheriff's department that handles police department stuff here, the land records, registry of deeds, all those types of things. On the executive side of the tax, you basically have the role of the assessor. So that also forms from the Constitution, which mandates how taxes are apportioned in Maine. The legislature creates tax laws and delegates enforcement to the state tax assessor. The state tax assessor then delegates enforcement down to the local level. And the local assessor is the one that implements the actual assessment role down at the local level. A little bit about the way budgets and taxes flow. Everything, again, flows from Maine's Constitution to the legislature. It seeds down to the municipal, county, and school taxes. So those the town meeting, the county commissioners, and your school referendum, they all formulate their budgets. They determine how much of those budgets needs to be funded by the property tax. So each part of government has other revenues that come in that they use towards their operations. After all those other revenues are accounted for, what you're left over with is the amount that goes into the property tax. Those entities then warrant down to the assessor how much money needs to be assessed for their particular branch of county or school or municipal. So the assessor must warrant for collection the amount that's directed to him by legal vote. So if the county sends a warrant to the assessor that says, assess the town of Raymond $1 million for Cumberland County fees, the assessor must honor that. The assessor does no power to say, geez, we really like to do that, but we can only give you $800,000. If the votes are legally passed and warranted, then the assessor is obligated to warrant that amount to taxes. Once that's done, it flows out of appropriation and assessment down into collections and operations. So then the tax collector takes over from the assessor, and the tax collector is actually in charge of going out and collecting all the assessed taxes from all the property owners in town. And then the tax collector gives that money over to the local treasurer, and the local treasurer pays the money out to the school in the county, and then also pays all the municipal bills that come up because the treasurer is seated at the local municipal level. Essentially, one of the things to note here is that the town acts essentially as a pass-through agent for the school and the county. So if we have to pay $15 million to the school department, to SAD 14, they expect to get all their $15 million in monthly payments, regardless of whether or not the town is fully collecting all of the warranted taxes. So the town is kind of the liability holder there for delinquencies and things like that. So we're kind of the middleman in that area, and we're directly responsible for our own expenditures. A little bit about the Office of the Assessor. Some of you may, when you run for select board, sometimes it can be a surprise to find out that, hey, guess what? You're also the assessor here for the town of Raymond. Under Maine statute, municipalities which do not choose a separate board or a single assessor, the select boards serve that role as the town assessors. And what is frequently happens is the towns then hire a professional assessor, such as myself, to act as the agent for the board and handle all the day-to-day operations of the department and the evaluation of properties. Typically, the assessors then handle things like the annual tax commitment, the setting of the tax rate each year, any appeals that come after taxes are issued, generally come up to the board, but all the normal day-to-day type things of reports that we need to file, all those things tend to come through the assessing office at the department level. Assessors in Maine have a unique role in government structure. You have a dual role. You are both a municipal official, and in your case, the municipal officers. So you're kind of the executives of the town, but you also, as assessors, are an agent of state government and somewhat separate from your role as a municipal officer. Because of that, municipalities under the law cannot exert any legal control over the actions of the municipal assessors, because as assessors, you fall under the control of the state tax assessor. And so when you're the same person, can get a little bit confusing. But if you're in a town that has a town council or a city council who serves your legislative role, there's a real division there between that board and the assessor. And as I said earlier, assessors are required to obey all warrants received by them and govern themselves by statute. So one of the primary things that the assessors do, and it's the primary role of the board, is they set the tax rate each year. And this tax rate is fundamentally a mathematical formula. It's not a formula where the assessors can make a decision to assess more tax than what is legally warranted to them. They pretty much have very little leeway in terms of overlay as to how much additional tax can be added. Really only the amount necessary to round the tax rate itself. And the tax rate is arrived at by taking the total amount of property tax and dividing it by the total amount of the town's taxable value. And this is an example of our current year. So for our FY 25-26 year, the school, county, and municipal budgets required $20,801,000 to be raised through the property tax. At that time, we had $1.1 billion of taxable value on the books. And if you divide those two, you arrive at that tax rate of $18.80. Once we know the $18.80 number, that number is then applied uniformly to every property in town to get their individual assessment. So if your home was valued at $300,000 at an $18 tax rate, you have a $5,600 tax bill that year. If you do that with every property in town, it's going to add up to exactly $20,801,000. So that's how the system is, the rate is applied on the mass level and how it's distributed out to every property in town. Currently, about 24% of the property tax supports the municipal budget, including TIF and overlay funds. The remaining 76% is school and county.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So no matter where you live in Raymond, we all get charged that same price. So in other words, if you're on the waters, the only difference is going to be the value of your property.
Yeah.
Which will change your tax amount will be, but it'll be still all at the same price.
Yeah. So if you look at step 2, the tax rate is the same for every property in town. The assessed value is the number that changes. Depending on your location, the value of your property.
Mm-hmm.
Maine does not have a split tax rate system. I think Massachusetts has split tax rates where commercial properties can be assessed at a different tax rate than residential properties. It's something that I think that the property tax force up in Augusta has been toying with is possibly a constitutional amendment for some split tax rates. It's quite a process to go through to change that because it does require a constitutional amendment. But one of the issues that has been happening in service center towns, like the most glaringly evident would be Lewiston right now. Lewiston revaled this year, and there was a pretty sizable tax shift onto residential property off of commercial. So that's caused them to kind of put a pause on things over in Lewiston. It doesn't without a constitutional change. It's kind of unavoidable. It's been a residential boom And so commercial property in those types of towns has tended to not appreciate as fast as residential stuff.
Let me see what I can think of. I guess, let's, go ahead.
Okay, a little bit about the role of the assessors in particular. This is what Maine's constitutional requirement is, that all taxes upon real and personal estate shall be apportioned and assessed equally according to the just value thereof. Essentially what that's saying is you've got your property tax, and then it must be divided equally according to value. So as long as you are equitable, meaning you have all property types assessed at roughly the same percentage of market value, that's what equal according to just value means. So what we don't want to have is one segment of the population assessed at, say, 75% of market value, and another set of the population assessed at 30% of market value, because then you have unequal apportionment. So that's the constitutional requirement from which all the tax laws are derived from.
I have a question. If we go back to that last slide, not this one, the one before that, and we have the way you come up with the dollar 1880,
Mm-hmm.
is that with everything accounted for, what we can add to help try to bring that down for every rule, everything that we've looked at?
Mm-hmm.
That's the number we've came with. You know,
Right.
it's not, that's any surplus or anything we have, it's all what we've drawn.
Yep, that's after.
That's the bottom, that's it, that's the number.
Yep, that's after all non-tax revenues like revenue sharing, excise tax revenue, use of surplus. Everything has been boiled out on the municipal side. The school has done that on their side before it goes to referendum, and the county's doing it on their side before they vote. And the 20.8 million is what you're left over with that you have to code to the property tax for.
So that's our real hard number. The county's put in, everything's put in, everything, our surplus has been put into it.
That's your actual mill rate right now from last
Yep.
year.
Yep.
This is last year. Okay, so we're not talking about this year's.
No, you don't know that yet.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, that's what
Yeah,
I'm trying-
this is
yeah.
the year, this is the last commitment. Yep. So, I'll give you some general numbers. They're not exact, but, probably, the municipal budget is probably about half funded by non-property tax revenue, and the other half is coming through the property tax. So we have, when you go to town meeting, you'll see that there was, $2.3 million of other revenue that the town meeting approved. That's your excise tax, all the little fee money, all the things that come in, reimbursements from the state, all those types of things that are used to reduce the budget to get to the property tax. We also have the state revenue sharing that comes in as well. And on the school side, they have education subsidy that they take off of their end, and they boil it down to what they need from property tax. So yeah, the 20.8 is the bottom number after everything else has been accounted for.
But that was for last year's or this year's. We still haven't got next year's.
That's right.
You don't have the mill rate, correct? Because you don't have the valuations
Yeah.
yet.
So the budgets have all been approved. What we don't know are what the valuations are yet. And once that's all finalized in September, we'll know all the valuation totals. We'll know the situation with the fund balance. We'll know all of what we'll know how much property tax needs to be collected. And typically what we'll do is we will give the Board of Selectmen some choices as for rates. They really come down to how much surplus you apply or how much overlay you run. And most of the time we're within 5 or 10 cents. Your options are pretty limited by the time we get to September.
You've found everything you can already, basically.
It's already, the votes have been cast.
Right.
Everything is, is pretty much set in stone. It's just a mathematical calculation at that point to choose from. Again, just to reiterate the appropriations part of it, one of the common misconceptions about revaluation is that it's a money grab by the town and that somehow the higher values equate to more revenues in for the town. That's not the case. The revaluations are essentially revenue neutral. It's the budgets that determine how much property tax we need, and the values are used to apportion the tax. So if you use the pie, the pizza slice, or the pie analogy, the size of the pie is the budget, and how much of the budgets have to be funded by property tax. What the assessments do is they slice that pie up and they give everybody a piece of that pie, and the pies are sliced by property value. So rather than 3,000 or 4,000 equal slices, Maine's Constitution requires that we give a larger slice to a property that's worth $2 million than a property that's worth $500,000. So that's how the system works. It doesn't generate revenue. It's all about apportionment of the tax.
So Kurt, I just want to make a comment that, you mentioned a minute ago that sometimes people characterize the tax burden as a money grab by the town. And just want to remind folks that the tax burden that we experience as citizens of this town is voted on by the Raymond voters every June. If folks are not happy with their tax bill, then they need to show up to the budget committee meetings and make their voices heard. They need to show up in June. Actually, it starts in May with the school. Show up to those meetings and vote. It does no good to sit home on your couch and bitch about your tax bill. You have to get up and you have to do something about it. If you're not happy with it, then you need to do something. So just wanted to throw that out there, that each one of us has a responsibility to the tax burden that we all share, and that we have a voice, and it's at the voting booth, and it's at public meetings such as this one today. So I encourage people to get out and be active and make their voices heard. If you think there's things in our current budget that need to be cut or could be reduced, then you need to start going to the budget committee meetings and talk to those folks, because they are starting to design the budget for next fiscal year this fall. So winter. So I encourage people to become active. Thank you, Kurt.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the local government is pretty much the most direct democratic portion of the system that we have. We don't have a ton of say on an individual level as to what happens at the federal government level, or even really the state level. But down at the local level, there's a lot of control there on the budget side, and there's also on the assessment side, the valuations that are used are directly related to what your neighbors and former neighbors have bought and sold their property for here in town. So you've got, everything boils down to the individuals in town, what they buy and sell property for, and what the budgets are. And like when you go back to that first slide of all the things that are funded under the property tax, it's pretty hard to go and look at that list and find things that we can live without. Most of these things are necessary, and it's difficult decision to decide where to trim when you're talking about EMS and fire versus police, versus education. It's like, where do you make those cuts? And it's not an easy decision. A little bit about how we do the assessment process. So assessments are a different type of appraisal than what most people are probably used to. Most people are used to having a fee appraisal for a mortgage, or they're going to sell their home, and they get what's called a single property appraisal, where someone focuses in on their property, they look for comparable sales, they make adjustments, and they arrive at an estimate of value. Mass appraisal is a little bit different. What we do is we create a model, a statistical model, which is based on the sales that happen in town across all types of property classes, single-family homes, commercial stuff, waterfront, all the different types of property. The model is calibrated and verified using the sales that happen in town. And then once the model is operating well with the sale properties, it is then distributed out to all the non-sale properties in an equitable manner to arrive at an estimate of value. And what we do is we use something called a ratio study to gauge how the model is performing. It's where we look at all the sales that come in town, we look at the assessments compared to those sales, and we look for how is the model performing now. Is it producing equitable assessments, or are there areas that are straying and becoming inequitable? Maine Revenue comes to every town in the state of Maine, and they conduct a ratio study for every town, and they use that as the basis for our state valuation. So the state already equalizes every town to 100% statistically, and they use the state valuation for all sorts of allocations, education, revenue sharing. It's used to slice up the county tax. So even though our assessments haven't been touched in quite some time, the state does know roughly where we are and uses the equalized numbers to handle state aid. Do you have anything you want to say, Kevin, about valuation models? That's really your area of expertise.
I think you covered it so far, yeah.
Can I ask a question, Kurt?
Mhm.
So, and what you're saying there, the way that you come up with it now, let's say if somebody has a house that's worth $300,000, and somebody comes in and buys a house next door to it, and they tear it down, they put $1.5 million house up, that guy with a $300,000 is now not automatically going to become into the tax rate of the value of that $1.5 million house. Is that what you're saying? That's why you're doing that general, what's being sold and what's in the area? Or is that person that's got the $300,000 house all of a sudden going to have his taxes go up because now the value of the property near him is just taking a huge jump?
Well, I mean, the value of the property near him, if that person put $1.5 million home on it, then he can expect to receive an assessment of $1.5 million. You know,
The guy that owns the $1.5 million
Yeah.
house, the guy that owns a $300,000 home.
is not suddenly going to be worth $1.5 million because he didn't build $1.5 million house. He still has a $100,000 house or whatever it is. You know.
So you're going to go on the same mill rate, but you're going to have difference in the value of the actual property.
Yeah, I mean, what happens is you can have a house that, you know, that 3 years ago was worth $300,000, but if 3 similar homes in that neighborhood 3 years down the road sell for $450,000, it's a pretty good indicator that the house that was worth $300,000 is now worth around $450,000. You know, if equal properties, equal value. You know, a scenario where someone builds a property that's different than that property is going to be valued based on what it is. Am I explaining that
Yeah,
correctly?
that's correct.
Well, my thought process is somebody's been there forever, you know, especially the family had it
Yeah.
many generations. You know, the house was probably bought for very little money.
Yeah.
And now you start building these great big, you know, houses around it. Are we going to tax them out of their house?
Well, that's a real concern because, you know, in terms of the assessment process itself, there's no mechanism to protect people for that. We have to value their property based on what the market thinks their property is worth, not based on how long they've been there or what their financial situation is even. Now, there's other programs and stopgaps on the back end to try to help people who are in that situation, but the assessment, the process itself doesn't allow for us to consider those types of things when we make an assessment. You know, the things are happening. I know what you mean. You know, you've got Maine residents working either retired or working Maine jobs, but they're in a market which is driven by out-of-state influences. But unfortunately, that's the situation that we're in.
So the legislature a couple of years ago passed LD 290 and then later repealed it, which would have helped in that regard. And but it's a legislative action at the state level, those types of things.
So a worst-case scenario, if somebody comes in, they build 4 or 5 houses around there, and they all go up to that $1.5 million, the guy in the middle with the 300,000 is pretty much in trouble.
Well, not necessarily, because
No.
that guy hasn't updated anything. All these are brand new houses.
Yeah.
So you
But I
got to
mean-
split the value of the land versus the value of the house. These people tore down a house, built $1.5 million house with brand new construction material, all that. This guy's still living in a 20, 30-year-old house. So that building itself is not appreciating. The land around it might appreciate a little bit, but that's only a fraction of the value of the overall tax.
I'm just
So-
going, like Kurt said, if 4 or 5 places around him sell or a house and raises the value, that's going to raise the value of that house.
It raises the land value, but it doesn't raise necessarily the house value, because that's still, that asset didn't appreciate because he didn't tear his house down and rebuild it with new modern, he hasn't updated it, hasn't anything like that. Then the value of the house isn't really changing, but the value of the land is, because the land around him is now being valued higher because
Being
people are
moved way
paying
up,
more money
right.
around it. So it's,
Well, and, like a simple example, I think, would be if you have a street that has a bunch of 1,300 square foot average ranches, and pre-2019, those homes would sell for $250,000. All of a sudden, now they sell for $500,000. So if 3 out of 10 of those houses sell for $500,000, and they're all similar and they're all in the same neighborhood, then the other 7 aren't worth $250,000 anymore. They're worth $500,000, because that's what the market is telling us that people will pay for that type of housing stock. So even though that person who hasn't sold hasn't done anything to his property, the market forces have lifted the value of that property.
That was, I maybe went a little bit too high with
Yeah.
the $1.5 million, but that was, I was saying I was concerned for
Yeah,
that.
no, it's a
Jacking somebody's
it's a-
taxes up pretty.
Well, but you have to remember, the taxes all are about apportionment. So if just because someone's property value rises by 100% or doubles, if everyone's property value were to double, but you still have the same amount of tax, then the rate that we're going to plug in at the end is going to drop down to accommodate that. So an increase in valuation does not necessarily mean an increase in tax.
It will lower the mill rate.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into, there'll be times when increases in valuation will increase tax, and we'll talk about how that happens.
So Kurt, just one other clarifying, in that example where the properties around you sell for a lot of money, you won't see an increase in your land valuation until the town does a revaluation, right?
Yeah, like, we wouldn't just target,
Right.
we wouldn't target everything, we have to stay consistent with our model and apply it consistently. So we don't want to treat certain properties, a certain way. What could happen, like if one particular neighborhood were to suddenly become very desirable on the market, and that neighborhood had 50 or 60 properties in it, and all of a sudden we noticed that neighborhood was selling for 10% more than it was, but all the other neighborhoods were selling the same amount, then you might need to make an adjustment to that whole neighborhood and bring them up 10% to maintain equity. Otherwise, you're undervaluing those properties compared to everyone else. But you wouldn't do selective properties. The only time we would do individual properties is if there's changes to that property, like they've required building permits and done work, or we discover that we had bad data on that property. Sometimes what happens is a property goes up for sale. We look at the sale listing on Redfin, we see all the interior photos, we get the bedroom bath count, and if we haven't, we look at our property information and we're like, oh, we've got all these things wrong. We'll make corrections so we have good data, but it's still within the context of the model. We're not,
Right.
we're not applying different schedules to that property. Okay, so, why is the revaluation necessary? The main concern is fairness as defined, and fairness is one of those things, it's defined by Maine's Constitution, as we talked about earlier. It's equal apportionment according to just value. if we left it up to all of our own selves, our definition of fairness would change depending on who we were. For instance, we might say, geez, it's not fair, that someone who's lived in this house for 40 years and is now on a fixed income is subject to these forces. So we have to rely on the constitutional and the statutory definitions of fairness and apply those. And what the revaluation does is it just redistributes the existing tax base. So depending on what happens with the budgets up or down, the revaluation is just changes how we apportion and slice that tax pie. And the assessments are based on what people, their new neighbors and their former neighbors purchased property for over the last couple of years. We have, as assessors, we carry the obligation to uphold that responsibility, that duty. So one of the common things that comes up during a revaluation is if we hired a firm. The firm is headquartered out of Massachusetts, and one of the things that you'll hear on social media and in chatter is that we're bringing Massachusetts values up here, and that that's just not the case. All the values are a response from the sales that happen in Raymond. So the appraisers are professionals. They deal with only this set of sales. This particular company, they have revaluations going on in Bangor, Augusta, Oakland right now. They had Cape Elizabeth, I think, last year or the year before. So they're not going to confuse Bangor sales with Raymond sales with Cape Elizabeth sales. So it's all going to be based on what's happening in this local market. So it doesn't matter where an appraiser is from. The data comes from the local sources. So also, one other reason to do the reval is simply compliance. We have some statutory minimums that we have to maintain, and we're out of compliance with those minimums. I'll have a graph on that shortly. Just again, to reiterate, the revaluation is revenue neutral, and by itself, the revaluation does not increase or decrease the total tax revenue collected by the town. And the amount of tax is a result of the democratic vote by Raymond residents and their elected representatives. It's been 21 years since the last revaluation, so we're going to be probably seeing quite a few changes on the property assessment front. That's a long time. A lot of the market forces changes have happened within the last 5 or 6 years, but then mixed into that, you're also going to have property changes. Properties have some been improved that we may not know about. Some have fallen into disrepair that we don't know about, and all these things are going to be accounted for. I'm almost done. A little bit about where we're at right now. So back in 2018-19, the average assessment to sale ratio was around 90%. So if a home sold for $1 million or sold for $500,000, chances are we had 450 on it. Our statistical average was pretty close to what market was. And you can see that leading into the pandemic era, market appreciation, where our assessment to sale ratio starts to drop, was pretty steady. It was that 3 to 4%, 3-4% a year, kind of normal market appreciation. And then when the pandemic came in and we started to get an influx of folks moving in from out of state, we started to see double-digit appreciation in the real estate market. And so we quickly went from 80-90% of market to now we're at 45% of market. The statutory minimum is 70, so we dropped out of compliance about midway through the pandemic in 2021. It's taken us, it takes a year or two to kind of realize where you are, and then raise the money for the revaluation, go through the contracting and the bidding process, and then the project itself's been underway for over a year now. So by the time you realize that you're kind of out of compliance to getting corrective action, you can have a few more years of market appreciation that takes hold. And you can see what's going to happen is we're going to go all the way from 45% statistical average or median assessment all the way up to about 95%. So what took 8-10 years to drop, it's all going to come up in that 1 year. So what tends to happen is if people are unaware of what's been going on in the housing market around them, residents can be shocked when they get that notice and they see what their new property value is. Sometimes they don't understand that we're not saying that their property value changed that much in 1 year. It's just that we're kind of catching up for many years worth of market appreciation all at once.
So Kurt, is this data on the screen for Raymond only?
Yeah, this is Raymond. This data, except for the current year where we're expecting to be, is from Maine Revenue Services ratio studies. Every town, depending on when it conducted a revaluation, is going to find itself at a slightly different assessment to sale ratio. So if a town has revalued in the last couple of years, they're probably up in that 80-90% range. If they're like us and they haven't revalued in anywhere from 10 to 20 years, they're probably down in the 35 to 45% range. And we're kind of in the, I think Maine's been averaging about 100 revals a year the last 2 or 3 years. This year, I suspect there's about 75 revals going on in the state. We're kind of reaching the end of it. It takes about 3 or 4 years, but pretty much most every municipality in Maine either has revaled or is underway at this point. These market forces have affected the entire state. It's not just Cumberland County, not just Raymond. So aside from the actual sale ratio, where are we at in terms of ratio? There's the issue of equity. This is equity can be a little bit hard to get your head around. It has to do with things like coefficients of dispersion. But essentially, these are 4 sales that I picked out from Raymond. It tells you what our actual sales ratio is and what comparing it to our average. So sale number 1, the assessment on that currently is $286,800, but the sale was for $586,000. So the assessment to sale ratio on that's 49%. Our average or median ratio is around 45%. So there's a 4% differential from the average. That's actually really close. So that assessment is already quite equitable. It's only 4% deviating from what the average is. By the time you get down to sale number 3, that's a $561,000 assessment, but the property sold for $975,000. We're at 58% on that one, so we're 13% over the average. So that property is suffering a little bit of overassessment in terms of its equitable distribution. So even though the property sold for $975,000, it's slightly over on the dispersion side. And sale 4 sold at 35% of market, so we're 10% under the average. So that property is being undervalued compared to the norm. When we equalize the values, obviously if you have to go from 58% to say 95 or 100, you've got less distance to go. If you're going from 35% all the way up to 100, you're going to see sale 4 is likely to get an increase in their tax apportionment from the reval. Sale 3 may see a reduction in tax apportionment from the reval. That's how the system kind of plays out. This is so how equity is typically spread. So the blue chart is a typical reflection of what things look like before a reval. We have a wider spread off of the average. So if the average assessment is 45%, you're going to have, it's going to be spread out 25% on either side of that. So we don't have as good of equity in the current model that we could have. When we are done, what we're hoping to see and what we will see is a much tighter band of sale properties that are within 10%, 10-15% of the average. So we'll have better equity, and this will be the sales, which we can measure, but if we equitably work it out to the non-sales, then they'll be more equitable as well. In 2005, with that reval was done, the 2005 model would have produced something that looked like the red curve, but over the course of 20 years, as markets change and the assessment model doesn't, it gets diluted and we get less equitable. Okay, a little bit about how the revaluation is likely to affect property values. Now, the big caveat here is that this is dependent on assuming that budgetary requirements for the town, the school, and the county don't change. So if we have a flat tax, flat budget, if in scenario one, if a property value increases in value, but increases at a rate which is lower than the average, that property is likely to get a decrease in taxes. So it could still double in value, but if it's less than the average, it's going to see a decrease in tax under the reval. If it's anywhere near similar to what the average is, then it's likely not going to see a substantial change in taxes. But if the increase percentage is more than what the average is, these are the people that are assessed at 30% of market value when the average is, say, 40, 45, those properties are likely to see increases in the tax burden. If the tax is still $20.8 million, that all plays out, but it still equals $20.8 million. If we have a tax increase on the budget side, it changes the formula, it changes things a little bit, but strictly talking about the reval, this is how these things play out. A little bit about where we're at. We're looking at a 2-year sales sample for Raymond. Median sale price on the interior single family is around $470,000. We've got about 120 plus sales to work with in that area. So again, that's the median. There's sales lower than that. There's sales higher than that. On the waterfront, we've got around 45 sales. Median sale price on the waterfront, $1.1 million. So you've got stuff that's sold at $750,000. You got stuff that's sold at $3 million, but the median is 1.1. On the county level, Maine Association of Realtors, this is the rolling 3-month average comparing 2025 to 2026. This is the 3 months leading into the assessment date of April 1st. County average for Cumberland County last year was $550,000. This year it's $560,000, 1.82% change year over year. So you can see that at least in terms of the prices that sold during that time frame, things were fairly stable in terms of prices in Cumberland County. Project status, all the data collection efforts are complete, and we had a large response on the callback appointments. So KRT was gracious enough to extend our callback appointment timeframe well into June. So KRT spent March, April, May, and half of June doing appointments. They had over 750 callback appointments for interior inspections for the reval. So those have all been conducted and keyed in. I would think our entry rate, we have good data on the interior of the housing stock on about 50% of the properties. You can see we still had about 1,300 properties that were measured only, but there wasn't anyone home, and those people didn't call for an appointment. So if when the values are released, those people should be hopefully checking their property record cards, and if there's any errors, that's a chance for them to get them cleaned up during the hearings. Sales review is complete. Kevin is working on the sales and residential modeling. It's about 80% complete, so there's still work to do in the modeling, so we don't have the values ready yet for public release. Commercial modeling is still in progress. Field reviews are about 80% complete. Kevin has been spending, I think, the last 3 weeks here in town with it, going to every property with the property record card, making any changes necessary, and lining up the neighborhoods for the land modeling and things like that. And as he completes that, the field office down in Massachusetts is keying in any changes that he makes. Probably another week or two there.
Question on the vacant parcels. Does that mean pieces of property with no buildings on them? Or is this,
Right, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that was it, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had, there's still 174 properties that were either posted or had a total refusal, for anything to be done on the property. Of that total, there was 60 people who had posted properties that called for callbacks. There were 400 people that called that had 124 people had given info at the door, but then had a callback appointment in anyway. And I think we had 400 property owners who called for appointments that didn't get it, weren't home on the first pass. Can't get this thing to go. Somehow it's coming in up there. Okay, so the remaining parts of the project, KRT still has a couple of weeks left to finish up the evaluation process. I'm expecting to do town reviews. We'll have about a week to look at the land neighborhoods, look at all the values. We're projecting that the values will be ready to be released to public at the end of this month, end of July, early August. Taxpayers will be getting letters with their new valuation. KRT will host copies of all the property record cards on their site. So when someone gets their letter, they'll be able to go on and download their property record card and review it. They'll be able to look at all the sales data so they can see what's been selling around them. If property owners have questions or concerns or things that they discover that are errors on their card, KRT will be conducting hearings for most of the month of August. We expect hearings to kick off around August 8th or 10th, probably last through the end of the month. I expect to be doing those here at the broadcast studio. KRT will handle all the scheduling for those hearings. They'll also do phone hearings if people want to discuss with KRT their value over the phone. Once the hearings are complete and any changes are made as a result of the hearings, they'll turn over the final values to the town around the first week of September. What my expectation is after Labor Day weekend, I'll be here that entire week to do a final review of the values and start to formulate the tax rate options for the board. And we'll be looking at issuing the tax assessments and the tax rate September 15th at the Selectmen's meeting on September 15th. And that's kind of where we're at.
When you said you're going to be doing that here at the broadcast studio here, is that going to be live? In other words, are you recording that to go out into that thing, or is that just a,
No,
you're just
those,
using this as a building?
yeah, as a building, because I think, what do you anticipate 4 to 5 KRT staff for hearings?
Yeah, we can break it up between phone hearings and in-person hearings.
So my goal is to not disturb the setup here. So what I suspect is we'll have a setup here where taxpayers will be able to sit with a representative in this room and go review their property record card, go over any issues that they have with a KRT representative. You know, I'm expecting that we'll probably have full hearings for at least 3 weeks.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Only comment I got is thank you very much. I got an awful lot of good knowledge out of this.
Yeah,
And it would be great if we could have a copy of your
Okay, yeah,
your charts
Yep.
and that program we just went through.
sure. Yep, it's dry. It's not very exciting material.
But it's stuff that we needed to know. I
Right.
mean, I didn't understand. At least I know it helped me out a lot. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure that some that's been on the board a little bit longer know more about it, but I mean, it really helped me
Yeah.
get an understanding.
One thing I think I probably should add, what I'm anticipating is, because KRT's responsibility is to value the properties in town, not to address what people's tax ramifications are. So, you know, we won't know what the tax rate's going to be when the initial letters go out. What I'm expecting we will do is, you know, we will try to reiterate to people not to try to calculate what their tax bill is going to be. Especially what you don't want to do is use this year's $18.80 rate on your new value. It's not going to work. It's going to produce a massive tax that's, you know, not going to be the real number. So the guidance for the resident, for the taxpayer, is to look at the value. What our goal is here is to, and the legal requirement, is to come up with a reasonable estimation of the value of the property. It's mass appraisal. We're not going to hit every property exactly on the head. Even the sale properties, there'll be slight variations because we're using a multitude of sales. But what the law is looking for is reasonableness. So obviously if someone has evidence that their value is worth $500,000 and we have a $2 million value on it, that would not be reasonable. But the difference between 500,000 and then 550 is 10%. It's well within the range of reasonableness. So what we're looking for the residents to do is make a reasonable estimation of the value, look at what's selling for the homes around them, and address issues of valuation with KRT. So KRT, has no idea what our tax load is, and that's not their responsibility. So we'll handle those queries once the tax bills actually go out in September. We'll handle those in-house. And that's all I got. Did you have anything?
All set?
Yeah, so Kurt, you bring up a good point. So just to reiterate, please don't panic.
Yeah.
Don't take that 1880 per thousand and look at your new valuation and freak out. Please don't do that.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we'll be getting a lot of questions around that time. So if you plan to come see Kurt, please do make an appointment because he is part-time, and we'll reiterate that as that date gets closer. But he's not available for walk-ins because he's not here full-time. So if you have any questions when you get your values, just call the office, make an appointment, and he'll do his best.
Yeah, I'm expecting, especially once tax bills are issued, and we won't have the full-time benefit of KRT's staff here. I'm going to add almost 50% more time to Raymond over this next fiscal year, but that's still not a lot. Instead of doing 60 days a year, which is basically a day a week, I will be able to produce, like 85 to 90 days a year, but it's still only a couple of days a week. So I do anticipate that our local staff will probably become somewhat bogged down, and we'll just have to ask that residents be patient. If they make an appointment, that appointment could be a few weeks out in a matter of a month. Right now, we always take residents, can walk right in, and we take residents as they come. And residents are used to being able to just get in their car and drive down to the town office and speak with someone. The volume that I think that we're going to incur here is going to make that difficult. And we just ask for patience from the residents as we work through this process. It's going to take all of the next year to work through this.
All right, thank you, Kurt.
Yep, thank you.